Hey guys, welcome to the Dill Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo, and I'm very excited to tell you about a film that you may have never heard of or you may have not necessarily had on your radar in this upcoming awards season, but I wanted to put it on your radar and help add to the ongoing snowball effect of hype that is accumulating around this film because I think it's a very interesting one, and that is The Missing. It is a new film, not to be confused with Missing, which came out earlier in the year, but this is The Missing. This is a Filipino film. This is actually the first feature-length animated film to show at a very prestigious film festival in the Philippines. I love, first off, seeing new works and creative works and innovative works from around the world because I feel like sometimes it's hard as, someone who only goes to theaters in the United States to branch out of that bubble. I'm very fortunate where I live in New York to get immersed with so much great international cinema, but even then I feel like sometimes the international cinema that we are given, that we are shown as just American moviegoers, is still so confined. And I feel like with movies like The Missing, it's this little gem that feels small but could be so huge and could have such a huge impact if more people have their eyes on it, if more hype is given to a type of film like this, because I think this film is very special, and it makes me almost angry that I don't seek out more international work, and I think that's the first and foremost thing, and the front of my mind right now talking about this film is just that I love international cinema. I love seeing how different people around the world can convey such familiar themes and can get to some really universal stories, but tell them in such a unique and distinct and individualistic way that this film definitely brings. And Carl Joseph Papa, the director of this, definitely deserves a lot of credit because this is a film, like I kind of just alluded to earlier, that has some very familiar themes, but is presented in a way that I've never seen before. I've seen similar animation styles, but never this very distinct type of animation, and the way they use a blending of different types of animation as the film goes on to kind of paint this larger portrait of what the film is about. What this film is about, it is called The Missing because there is a very blatant missing thing at the center of the film, being this protagonist Eric's mouth. We meet this character and he is presented without having a mouth. It's very fitting that this film is animated because Eric himself, the protagonist in this film, is an animator. He's prompted by his mother, played by Dolly DeLeon, to go visit his uncle one day, and then when he finds his uncle, he finds out that his uncle has actually passed away and has actually been dead for a few days, and we get this really haunting moment where he does discover his uncle, and first you see this dark house, and it kind of builds to this moment where you see flies, and then he notices there's a little bit of an off smell. It's a very harrowing scene. After he finds out that his uncle has passed away, he's actually visited by an alien that he has encountered in his childhood. You kind of see there are some flashbacks to where you can kind of see the history with this alien. So it's kind of like a science fiction fantasy film combined with an actual real drama about grief and trauma, and the idea that this passing in the family, whereas a lot of the other family members can kind of see it as this kind of sad, grieving moment, this character, Eric, there's a lot more that is kind of buried underneath the surface in regards to his relationship with his uncle, and also just the different childhood traumas that he has yet to confront. And that kind of goes to the overall idea of him being silenced and not having a voice in this film. I think it's very intentional to show that Eric has been so closed off and has been really reserved because of how his childhood has gone and the types of experiences he's had. And I love how as the film progresses, we start to see more and more of what his childhood trauma is and how it has come about and how it has affected the person he is, the way he interacts with other people. There's a really great central queer love story, which I love. This isn't just a science fiction film, it isn't just a drama, but it's also a queer love story. It really has so many different elements that I think a lot of different audience members can cling on to. If you're into that science fiction stuff, I think you'll enjoy that aspect of it. If you're into queer love stories like Portrait of a Lady on Fire, Brokeback Mountain, those are some of the more mainstream ones, but this has a really nice one too, especially the fact that they are younger and they're coming of age. There's a coming of age aspect of it. A lot of themes in this I actually paralleled with one of my favorite films, my favorite film of 2012, Perks of Being a Wallflower, which was a fundamental film for me growing up with anxiety, not necessarily sharing all the traumas of the central character in that film, but understanding what it means to to have this anxiety or this thing that is like chipping away at your soul and kind of burdening you as you grow up or as you try to grow up, and you aren't able to fully move on from something because it does eat away at your soul. And this film kind of showcases that in a quite literal manner, because as the film goes on, we see Eric at the start of the film not have a mouth, but as the film goes on, he loses an ear, he loses an eye, he loses other parts of him as he goes along, and you can start to see how that trauma really does overwhelm him. But then also, as the film progresses to its conclusion, seeing how he's able to be resilient and what he does to kind of get out of that headspace and try to take ownership once again of himself, and trying to kind of stand up to those very powerful demons that weigh him down. And I love the use of this alien like science fiction plotline as a metaphor for the demons he's facing. Now, the metaphors in this film are very blatant. I've seen a lot of people criticize it as a complaint for the film, but I think honestly the very in-your-face metaphors, especially when you're dealing with such a very distinct and deliberate animation style, I think it's actually welcome. I think the metaphors, yes, they're very obvious, but I think it's important in telling a story like this to kind of be obvious, to show an audience member that may be younger, that may be dealing with something similar, even if they're older and dealing with something similar, to show that there is a relatability there, that you are not alone, that you have other people around the world sharing in this experience. And I think that is very important to show these metaphors. And I like how the metaphors are shown. I like how it is mostly a visual way of telling rather than just something written or put in the subtext of the dialogue. A lot of the metaphor is done strictly through imagery, which I found very, very interesting. The primary form of animation we see is rotoscope animation, which is the same technique that a favorite film of mine from last year, Apollo 10½, the Richard Linklater film, had. It's a very similar style where I believe, at least as far as I know, I need to research this a little bit deeper, but I wanted to get this review out as soon as possible, but I believe they film everything with the actual actors on set, and then they use the actual creations of what they filmed to create animated versions of that. It's almost like adding an animated overlay and animating something that already exists. And because of that, you get some really great acting performances too, because Carlo Aquino, who plays Eric, is very excellent in the role, but a lot of his storytelling is through his eyes only, because he doesn't have a mouth. He can't say words. He writes everything on a whiteboard, so there's a lot of emotional connection that the audience needs through a lot of subtle but very physical acting from this actor in this role. And I think because of the rotoscope animation, you're able to get the most authentic performance possible, opposed to just designing it from scratch. I think because you have the actors on set kind of going through the motions. Same with Dolly DeLeon, who was amazing in Triangle of Sadness last year. That was a big breakout for her, for so many other people who didn't know her work, myself included. And she continues to put out good work. She's really excellent in this one too. But even her, you have a lot of like little subtle mannerisms and some really great kind of facial stuff, facial expressions and things that I think, because you're having the actors on set first and then animating stuff later, and then going through this rotoscope techniques, I think that is what makes it feel so much more raw and vulnerable and authentic. And I wish more people use this rotoscope animation technique, because I think it is such an interesting way to get the most authentic performances from an actor while still being able to show everything else visually in an interesting way animated, which you can't do live action. There's a lot of stuff in this film that could not be done live action, and if it was done live action, it might not look as good. It might be a little weird, a little uncanny valley, but because it's animated, you can kind of go bigger and bolder. You can make some colors pop a little more than others. You can make those fantasy elements feel natural in this world because it's animated, but because the actors were able to still film stuff and we're getting their real authentic facial expressions, it makes the characters feel that much more relatable and that much more lived in. And I think the technical stuff going on here is really masterful. I mean, it really is impressive, and I'm really glad that the Philippines submitted this as their Oscar contender this year, as they're hopeful to get into the Oscar category, because it's not just a unique Filipino film, but it's a unique film in and of itself, and I think that's why it deserves the recognition that I hope it gets. I would love to see this squeak in and get an Oscar nomination for international feature, and I think it's only possible if we continue the word of mouth and more people get their hands on it, or rather their eyes on it, and really watch this film, because I think if you watch this film, it's really almost hard not to connect to it. I mean, the last scene in this film, without diving into spoilers, just wrecked me emotionally. It was really beautiful to see. And again, it is a very blatant metaphor, but I really appreciated how blatant it was because it was such very dynamic visual storytelling, and it kind of encompassed everything we had seen before and kind of tied it up with such a perfect little bow to where it felt cathartic, but also very sad, but also very hopeful all at once. It felt like that definitive closure that this character needed, that this audience needed as they were going on the journey with this character, and for the other side characters as well, those who observe this central character. Because Eric is mute throughout this film, these characters still remain at an arm's distance from Eric because there's that communication barrier, and because Eric is so closed off and has so many other things that he's hiding that he has yet to conquer, so many demons that is overwhelming him. And I think it's really nice to see these other characters also have a full circle moment alongside Eric at the end and have this moment of connection between all parties included. I just think it's really amazing. It's a quick 90 minutes, which is also really nice to see because I feel like it's the perfect length to tell this story. A little bit longer and it may have dragged, a little bit shorter and it may not have felt as rich. I think it's the perfect length to tell a story like this. I'm just so excited now because I haven't seen a lot of Filipino films, and it's honestly kind of embarrassing. I wish I had seen more, and I hope that this is the start of something really great and new for me, and I hope I'm able to immerse myself in more of this art, and I hope if this does get an Oscar nomination, or at least it gets nominations in other places and other award ceremonies, I hope more people seek this out and see not only a very interesting animation style that they haven't watched a lot of and they can go check out, but a lot of Filipino art that they haven't seen as well. And I'd love to see what else this director has coming up in the future and what he's done before this, because it really is a beautiful work, and I'm very, very grateful to have seen it. It meant a lot to me to watch this film and to kind of feel these emotions with these characters and go on this journey and just be in awe of all the different animation styles, because it's not just rotoscopic animation either. The flashbacks are in their own unique animated style as well. I mean, it's not just solely married to one animation style, which is also great to see. Again, it's all about experimentation and how we move the art form forward, and I think something like The Missing is something that can take a story and a theme that is more familiar, but then in the way it presents that theme and the actual execution, it can then go for experimentation. It can be a little bit bolder, be a little bit more of a swing, and I think it really shows. I think there's some really dynamic visual and direction work going on here, and animated work, and the fact that they only shot this in 4 days, obviously they spent a lot of time on post-production and a lot of time on pre-production, but the fact that the actual shooting of the action with the actors was only 4 days long, I mean, that's still so impressive, despite a lot of the animation doing the heavy lifting. I mean, these actors only had 4 days to really dive into these roles and kind of sink their teeth into this dialogue and these connections and build those relationships and connections on set. And having been on a film set that was only a 10-day shoot for me personally, I understand not just the rigorous schedule, but the idea of connecting with a cast in such a short amount of time. And it's clearly evident in this film as well how well connected this cast was, how well those relationships were established on screen. I really like this film, and I hope more people check it out. And spoiler alert, I think it's going to end up getting some pickle nominations at the very least on my award ceremony come February or March when those are announced. So stay tuned for that, because I am including for the first time ever an international film category and a documentary category, and this film is very much in contention for the International Film Pickle Award for my own personal awards ceremony, and as well as the animated category that we always have, because I really love animation, and I love seeing animation that pushes the boundaries. I have seen rotoscopic animation before, but never in this way, never combined with all these other techniques, and never done in such a confined budget and also in such a quick, shooting schedule, 4 days. I mean, it's really impressive. And also thank you to Dennis Buckley, who told me about this film and told me to check it out. I'm very grateful for your recommendation, and it really is a special piece of work. So that's my review for The Missing. I hope you check it out when you have the opportunity to do so, and I hope we see a lot more of this film in the upcoming awards season. The next few weeks I'm going to be on vacation, so you're going to get a lot of reviews that are a little overdue. It's the overdue review here at the Dill Pickle Movie Network. We're going to be talking about a lot of films that I need to catch up up on, or that I've seen but haven't done reviews for because I've been busy with spooky season stuff and getting ready for vacation, but I will be giving you reviews. So the biggest one is the New York Film Fest review, where I'm reviewing a bunch of films I saw at the New York Film Festival. There will also be a review for The Holdovers and Killers of the Flower Moon coming at some point, so stay tuned for those. Otherwise, that's all I have today. Thank you to all these continued supporters who helped donate as part of our subathon last year. Next year, there will be another subathon. I'm not sure of the date of that yet, but these folks really have shown gracious support, and I'm very honored to call them friends, colleagues, and very grateful to have them as supporters. So thank you so much for watching. Check out The Missing, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.